Breaking news, the leader of the al-Qaeda terrorist group is believed to have been killed in a US airstrike. US media is reporting Ayman al-Zawahiri died following an attack in Afghanistan over the weekend. He was one of the world's most wanted terrorists, played a key role in the 9/11 attacks and took over al-Qaeda following the death of Osama bin Laden. Mark Stone has the latest from Washington, D.C.
This is a very, very significant counter-terrorism operation, as the Americans are calling it. You can see him here, the leader of al-Qaeda since 2011, since the Americans killed Osama bin Laden. He was number 2 of al-Qaeda during the 9/11 attacks, but it was his role in the bombings of the US embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam back in 1998 that first put this man on the FBI's most wanted list. And ever since, there's been a $20 million bounty on his head. We don't have any details at the moment of precisely where he was in Afghanistan, but this is a man who has been wanted, as I say, for a very long time, and we expect to get much more detail on it when the president speaks. It will also be interesting to note, as I say, the detail of how he was killed. Remember, since the American pullout of Afghanistan, they haven't had any boots on the ground, so to speak, no intelligence on the ground in Afghanistan, and drones that were up until last summer operating, American drones were operating in Afghanistan, are no longer doing that. And so I think what we will hear from President Biden is him claiming that this is proof that the over-the-horizon capabilities, as it's known, that the Americans have got means that they can still target terrorists within Afghanistan from beyond Afghanistan. But the top line is that this is a significant get by the Americans. They, as I say, have been wanting the man on the right ever since they got the man on the left back in 2011. He's an Egyptian by birth, 71 years old, and was the leader of Egyptian Islamic Jihad, EIJ as it was known, until he merged that group with al-Qaeda back in 1998, the same year as those 2 devastating bombings in the Kenyan and the Tanzanian capitals. And then, of course, a few years later, 9/11 followed. So I think from the White House, from the Pentagon, from the State Department, they will be very, very pleased that they have got this man.
And for more on this, joining me live is Fox News Middle East correspondent Trey Yingst. Trey, thanks for joining us. What more do we know about this strike?
Well, this is a very significant event. The leader of al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri, killed in a U.S. drone strike in Kabul, Afghanistan. As Mark noted, this is the first over-the-horizon strike, a strike from outside the territory of Afghanistan launched by the United States since the Taliban takeover last August. We are on the cusp of that one-year anniversary, and it is significant because it follows reports on the ground where the Taliban actually acknowledged there was a strike in the Afghan capital, but they didn't say who was killed, and they also didn't say what group was associated with the person that was killed. Initial reports indicated it could have been targeting an ISIS-K militant, which would have made sense from the perspective of the past operations the United States has conducted in Afghanistan, including that drone strike that took place where they attempted to target someone from ISIS-K but ultimately killed a group of civilians. This is even more significant because it indicates the United States still has the ability to strike terrorists abroad, even in countries where they do not have boots on the ground. Zawahiri is known among the terrorism community as someone who came up among the ranks of al-Qaeda. In 1998, he joined the organization. He was a deputy of Osama bin Laden and then ultimately took over the organization in 2011 when bin Laden was killed. Back to you.
And we know that there are no boots on the ground anymore. So how big of a get is this for the United States?
Well, it's a huge get for the United States because it follows a number of significant operations to try and target al-Qaeda operatives across the region. It's been very difficult for U.S. officials to gather intelligence since American troops pulled out of Afghanistan. And we saw the collapse during the withdrawal and the efforts of the Americans to try to get as many of their officials and soldiers out and to safety once the Taliban took over. The fact that the leader of al-Qaeda has been killed in a U.S. drone strike once again indicates the American ability to strike terrorists around the world, but it also gets to the core of the U.S. efforts abroad when it comes to trying to stabilize the entire world. The U.S. is trying to continue operating against terror organizations, not only in places like Afghanistan, but also in other places like Iraq and Syria. So killing the leader of al-Qaeda sends another message to leaders of other terrorist organizations like the Islamic State that the Americans will continue to operate and secure not only their interests abroad, but also continue to target these terror leaders, as we've seen was done over the weekend in Kabul, Afghanistan.
And tell us, who is al-Zawahiri and what was his role in previous terrorist events like 9/11?
Ayman al-Zawahiri joined al-Qaeda in 1998, and since then he has been some part of planning every major attack that has taken place conducted by the organization al-Qaeda, from the USS Cole attack in the harbor in Yemen in 2000 to the U.S. Embassy attacks in sub-Saharan Africa and 9/11. This is a man who was the deputy of Osama bin Laden and someone who before that was an Islamic revolutionary. He spent years in an Egyptian prison following the assassination of Anwar Sadat. And then ultimately he went and became a doctor and then became one of the world's most notorious terrorists, an infamous man who had a bounty on his head for $25 million US. And so this targeting in Kabul, Afghanistan, again, does send that message. One other thing to note about al-Zawahiri is he was part of the propaganda arm of al-Qaeda. This is a man who was often releasing videos trying to encourage lone wolf attacks in places like the United States. And as recently as last year, he released a video indicating that he was indeed still alive. There were many rumors circulating that he may have been killed in previous strikes. But this left a breadcrumb for the CIA, for other intelligence organizations around the world to ultimately find where he was and, according to U.S. officials, over the weekend launched this drone strike in Kabul, Afghanistan.
Trey Yingst, appreciate the update on this breaking news. Thank you. And earlier, Sky News spoke to Chair of Global Islamic Politics at Deakin University, Greg Barton, on First Edition. Mr. Barton says while the death of the al-Qaeda leader was significant, there is no guarantee that this would mean the end of the terrorist organisation.
It all depends on who al-Qaeda manages to get to replace the Zawahiri. If they get somebody, obviously somebody younger, very likely somebody more charismatic, if they can survive, of course, because there's a target on your back when you become leader of al-Qaeda, it might well be that this actually ends up strengthening al-Qaeda. And of course, they'll play the martyrdom piece. It'll perhaps help it consolidate al-Qaeda's appeal within Taliban ranks in Afghanistan. So we'll have to wait and see.